met last Friday and we reviewed the things that we've already implemented, which I won't go through all of them, but we previously discussed everything from paying for the substance abuse evaluations, the whole jail alternatives, the very successful program with the public defender's office, the sheriff's office, jail alternatives, my office, to review everybody who's in jail, who's really decreased the numbers and our average number of inmates in there. We talked about some of the things that we could still do, and one of the things is Ron Berg was there from Mecca, and he talked about how there are 6 detox beds still available, and perhaps we need to do more to just make sure law enforcement knows about the possibility there might be detox beds when they're dealing with somebody who's intoxicated, if they choose to try that as opposed to arresting them for public intox. Of course, it has to be somebody who's able to walk into Mecca and it's not being a problem. Most recent ones I've seen of public intox are ones that would not be appropriate for that, but certainly that might be an option. And so doing some more training for law enforcement on that was one thing discussed. Then also, Lexi was there from the group Team Vote No Justice Center, and some of the things that he said their group has discussed includes kind of the priorities and the failure of the policing in Iowa City, university police, that the war on drugs has been a failure, and that there should be more effort on the part of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee to put pressure on local law enforcement and the legislature, Iowa, at the national level to change from the war on drugs and to push to legalize marijuana at the state level was their proposal. Really suggested that the change should be to prevention from, and overall it should be prevention from people going into jail as opposed to just increasing the space for jails. So some of the other suggestions were having the county pay for electronic monitoring so more people would do that. Currently there is very limited pretrial release interviews. There are very few pretrial release interviews occurring because of cuts at the Department of Correctional Services. And then, so the question was, could the county pay for the interviewer so that more interviews could take place, which could potentially lead to people not being detained as long in jail because the judge would have more information at the time, the initial appearance. And kind of the emphasis is that the county should be funding alternatives and not just funding for more jail beds. And then we talked a little bit about the disproportionate minority contact, and that was something that was a big issue with the anti-group. And it's something that Dorothy Whiston couldn't be at the meeting Friday, so it's something that we want to keep working on, but we don't have a specific proposal at this point, but it's something that we had previously discussed working on. And we knew that there should be more advocacy for mental health, substance abuse treatment at the state level instead of just incarceration. I don't know, Alexi, did I cover those things fairly well from the?
Yeah, I would say so.
So, okay. So, I think our plan was just kind of to plan another time to meet and kind of continue to look in particular about disproportionate minority contact and especially, and also maybe more training with law enforcement, especially in the areas of detox and things like that, once available. We discussed how we had, previously looked at whether we could have a facility for just people who are very intoxicated, but the problems with the statute in terms of it can't be a locked facility, and then what do you do if people try to leave and they're still intoxicated, and liability issues. So those are ongoing. So I think that's kind of the report. I don't know. Anybody else? Jessica, anybody else? Kevin, or anything else to add?
The only thing I would add, Jessica, jail alternatives, the only thing I would add is that we had conversations that there are a lot of things that the various parties are doing that are jail diversion, in terms of law enforcement training, or Janet meeting with the chiefs to sort of prioritize and kind of outline arresting patterns, sorts of things. And we maybe didn't do as good of a job of educating people on the variety of alternative strategies that we are doing that aren't maybe official programs, but are certainly things that we're doing to try to impact arresting patterns and treatment alternatives and stuff. So I think just getting
We haven't done a very good job of letting people
questions for Janet? Okay, seeing none, let's move on then to the report of the Public Information and Outreach Subcommittee.
We did have a meeting. We had a couple people who were here today at our meeting, and I thought we had a pretty good discussion of topics that had come up in connection with this issue. We didn't take any formal action as a committee on that day. I think it was an informative meeting, trying to find out some of the topics of concern and seeing how those could be hopefully blended and utilized to the extent possible in the ongoing campaign. Lonnie, Drew, you were there. Darren, anything else?
Any questions for Jim? Okay, well, moving right along. Next item is report from the Facilities Subcommittee.
We did meet, I think on November 21st, in the morning. I, Sheriff, attended as well as Judge Russell and most of our committee members. Dwight and Christine attended as well, and as did Dory Wilson. We had a lot of the same discussion that Janet had about disproportionate contacts, drugs, legalizing marijuana, issues of why people are in the justice system and not being diverted rather than being placed in the facility. Then there was the no for justice representatives were there as well, two of them, and had some discussion on their feelings as to why they didn't agree with the Justice Center. One of the reasons was that they actually felt that the facility should be separated. There should be two separate facilities, the jail versus the Justice Center. Felt it was just too convenient to have everything together. Didn't necessarily want to, or didn't I'm trying to think of the word I don't want to use, but anyway, to separate those two would make it less convenient for people to go into jail and be put into the justice system rather than having them all together. Judge Russell, do you have any other comments on discussing on that?
Well, I found it a very frustrating meeting because the opponents of the Justice Center didn't have any data to back their views. And I'm aware of this committee meeting for a decade and having long discussions about whether the Justice Center should combine the jail and the courthouse, whether it should be downtown or in another location, whether they should be on one bond issue, whether the size of the bond issue, both in terms of jail space, courthouse space, and dollar amounts was appropriate. And I thought that this was the product of considerable effort by a lot of people, reasonable people of different views, that the space needs have been carefully considered, that the dollar amounts have been carefully considered, and all the consultants had taken their task seriously, and we had a reasonable proposal that met current needs and also would take us 50 to 70 years into the future. And the opposing views seem to me, first of all, not to be based on data, and secondly, just to be driven basically by political views and preferences. And I don't know how to answer those complaints as we go ahead with the proposal. To suggest that having a jail and a courthouse in one building is a totalitarian concept, or to suggest that it's inappropriate to the urban fabric to have a jail in the downtown, or to suggest that the work of this committee and all its consultants and all the citizen participants is somehow inappropriate groupthink, is just very hard for me to respond to. So I thought it was a productive meeting. The result of the meeting, I think, was that we wanted to make sure that the opponents would be aware of all the meetings of this committee and all the subcommittee meetings so that they could attend to make their views known. And it would be my recommendation to the board that some of the vocal opponents, Professor Cox, for example, or Councilman Throckmorton, be invited to join the committee. I'd like to have all these people here so their concerns can be addressed. And to the extent that they have validity extent that they're simply political preferences or not backed by data or correct historic facts, they should be exposed to sunlight and addressed. And that expresses my frustration. Meeting, I will say, it was a very civil meeting. The building manager was there, the board was represented, most of the committee was there, so I thought it was productive in that sense.
Anybody else that was part of the committee? Any questions or comments? If you have a question and you're sitting at the back, if you could come up maybe to one of the microphones, that would be helpful. I think the microphone here will get everybody at the table one of these.
Yes, it should.
Okay.
Robert, I think Jerry got a comment from our meeting.
Well, yeah, there's a couple hands. Martha, if you want to just come up to this mic, we'll get you next, okay? Go ahead, Jerry.
I would like to concur with what the judge had to say. I did feel that it was good to hear the opposing viewpoints. I felt some of those viewpoints were more personal agenda items as opposed to factual. And I wish that some of these individuals would step forward with some questions prior to the vote so that there can be some education perhaps. And some explanations. Most of us have worked within the system for a number of years, 20 plus, most of us. And the judge said we have worked very hard, putting together some meaningful information, working very hard to provide alternatives in the community, and to try and base a decision based on one law enforcement agency's perspective and use that as a reason to vote down what is direly needed in order for us to continue to deal with individuals in our community is, I guess, kind of sad state of affairs. And I'm hoping that we can, at some point, meet common ground, have a common ground, and understanding how to move forward from here. And then move that dialogue based on that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Can you give your name, please? too?
Martha Hample. I just wanted to let everyone know that the name of our PAC is Vote No on New Jail, not Vote No on Justice. We're all in favor of justice, but Vote No on New Jail. And Judge Russell, we would come to you with data. I know you wanted specific numbers from us on what we thought was appropriate as far as numbers of beds. And we'll be able to do that as soon as Sheriff Lonnie Pokravic returns our email. We had some questions for him that we would need answered before we can come up with those numbers.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments, questions? Okay, moving on, report from the Funding and Grants Subcommittee. Supervisor Reddick chairs that, and she's not here. She did send me an email earlier. There was some question, there was a small amount of money, well, it's not a small amount of money, a large amount of money, small relative to the whole project, from the county reserves going into this project. If you recall, we're bonding for $46.8 million. The total project cost, however, was $48.1. So that $1.3 million is money targeted from the county reserves. Her committee has been looking into, is there any opportunity to get some more from the county reserves? The short answer is yes. It's not going to make a dramatic difference. It's not going to be way, way, way beyond that, but maybe more in the neighborhood of a couple million or slightly more than that. She'll have to give more details on that. I'm not really in a position to do so, but just so folks are aware, that at the time we didn't know exactly how much we could possibly tap into, and it's going to be close to maybe double what we had suggested. So I'll try to field any questions on that if anybody has them. Okay. Seeing none, moving on to additional comments from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee members. One thing that I think is important in terms of moving forward. Everybody I've spoken to on this committee, and I think probably most of the people in the chairs in the audience, feel that just because things happened on a certain way on November 6th doesn't mean our issue went away. We still have things we have to deal with. And so the question is, what do we do? In terms of whether or not we come back with another proposal and how that proposal would be, one of the key points was when can you do that? And Jana, would you want to talk a little bit about what we've learned about that? And
I'm sorry, we're having a hard time hearing this side over here.
okay,
The
Or maybe
code
speak into the microphone.
requires that if a bond issue fails to gain the 60% required, obviously we only got 56%, it cannot go back on the ballot for 6 months. Excuse me. That means that May 7th would be the earliest that there could be another vote on a bond issue for the Justice Center. A question had been posed to me because Supervisor Sally Stutzman was elected to the state legislature. Could it be that a special election would be held to appoint her replacement at the same time? The code requires that if there's a vacancy in the Board of Supervisors, it needs to be filled within 40 days if it's an appointment by the committee that's made up of the auditor, the treasurer, and the recorder. And they have to make that within 40 days. There could be a petition then within 14 days to have it on the ballot, and the election would have to occur at the earliest practicable date. If they choose to hold an election instead of appointing, the election has to be held at the earliest practicable date. Assuming that Supervisor Stutzman is going to resign around the beginning of January, assume so that she can go to the legislature in January, that would really put May 7th beyond a date that I would believe would be the earliest practicable date. There's not specific case law on it, there's not specifically an interpretation of what that term means in the code, but looking at the code and what the intent was of the legislature, I believe is to have an election, if there's going to be an election, earlier than 90 days, probably. I conferred with the Secretary of State's office to see if they had any guidance on this, and they concurred that they believe that it would need to occur within 90 days unless there was some extreme thing that happened that would delay it for that long. So that would not make it possible to have an election, a special election at the same time for the Justice Center bond issue, as well as for appointment of Sally Stutzman's replacement, assuming she resigns in early January. So that just, I mean, it wouldn't prevent the Board of Supervisors deciding to have a special election on May 7th for the bond issue if they wanted to. Just means we couldn't wait until that time to have the special election for Supervisor Stutzman's position. If there's a decision to have a special election, that would occur.
and so folks understand why this is even being discussed. Special elections cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000. And so to the extent that you can minimize those, obviously that's a good thing. We were hoping perhaps there'd be an opportunity to do two things at once and save that cost. It doesn't appear that that's the case. So
I should mention one other thing too. The code prohibits there from being a vote for this Supervisor Stutzman's position to be at the same time as the school board, a school election, and the same thing with the bond issue. It could be on the same date. So while there's a bond issue set for the schools in February, you cannot use that date as well.
nothing can be combined with a school
Right.
election.
Right, and we couldn't have the bond issue again by February.
So information for folks in terms of how we move forward. Another complicating factor then I suppose is the fact that because the school district has announced a February election, it looks as though now probably Sally's election perhaps early March. So you've already got elections in February and March, and then if you want to do another one in May, that's a lot of elections in a very short period of time. So I think that's a consideration for this group as well. Other dates that are available to the county, I think we've talked about are August, the first Tuesday in August is available for a special election, or in November, you have a general election where city councils will be Any questions or
So are you
comments? on
can
that?
combine with the city election?
Yes, you can. Cities and counties can combine, school districts can't combine with anyone else.
Well, it would seem logical to me that if you're gonna do it, that's when you would do it, that you would want a special election, which is the jail.
Is that June?
September.
September, thank you.
Well, September's the primary, right?
Right.
It'd actually be the November
November, right.
general.
I think I would know that by heart.
And every city's a little different, you know. Iowa City and New Heights, I think, are do it one way, and Coralville and Northville do it another way.
But the general election.
But the general's the same day for
Right.
everybody, yeah.
And I think that's, what we should- I think we should think about that. That gives us a little more time to educate people and get some of these questions answered. But the misinformation that's out there, I don't know if you could even, I don't know if people really want to know any different. You know, I really don't. That's part of the problem. Keep reading the same thing in like the BI and you try to tell them that that's not a true statement. They don't seem to care. I understand that they're a little low. But I would suggest that we seriously think about combining with city elections.
Other comments or thoughts from anybody?
Roger, if I could.
Can you come up to the mic, please, and give your name for the auditor's office?
My name is Shane Merrick. I'm the business representative for Carpenters here in Iowa City. I was just curious on the construction with this aspect, if we've looked at alternative delivery methods, because I'm of the opinion that the people that are against this will always be against this. And from a business perspective, and working with the school district as well with their upcoming things, and every year construction costs do increase. There are other ways of doing this, utilizing the money we're spending for sending the people to other counties in order to pay, basically saying a design build lease back option. If we've looked at that as a alternative to the bond referendum, or if we're just going to continue to spend more and more money.
That's a really good question. That issue came up it's quite some time ago. Folks remember as we were doing this planning, and the thought was that we at least, for a first crack, wanted to go the route of the election. But I think that probably needs to come back out on the table. Does everybody understand what Mr. Merrick's talking about? It's kind of the way that the Marriott Hotel was built, for example, or as a matter of fact, the building trust, the building we're in was built in part that way, which is that you, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can do it through either a reverse referendum, or you can do it through a private company builds a building and then sells it back to you at X number of dollars per year, that kind of thing. So those are options that could be available to the county at some point. Any other comments, questions? I think one of the things I'd like to do a little bit here now, if folks are willing, is to talk about what kind of things need to be on next month's agenda. Because it feels to me as though we ought to make some decisions in terms of some of the big picture things, like when are we talking about, what are we talking about, so that we can design whatever kind of work plan needs to be done. So I guess I'd kind of like to get some feedback from folks in terms of what things they think need to be decided. Maybe we could talk about them next month. Does that sound reasonable?
I'd like to see, a report back from Dwight and architects as to what changes they may make, and I think one of the big issues or comments that I heard was the design of so much glass and the appearance of the facility and the roof runoff, big flat roof, things like, he said it's not, it appeared it was. And I think some of those areas
enough that we could talk about almost anything here. Did he meet that test?
I think it's an additional comment for the Justice Coordinating Committee members, so it's an idea for how to do it.
Okay.
Some of the discussion we had was that this was the wrong site entirely. We can't do anything about that because this is the site we were given, basically. But, you know, with that as a premise, we did look at reducing some of the glass on the upper 2 floors, and I just have an image of what that might look like. Get feedback from this group, and we can go back in and make changes as we hear feedback. I don't know where best to put this up, maybe over.
Maybe up here by me, next to the facing this way.
So this was a rendering we put together, based on the previous one. It's just like showing the corner of the new facility, and then obviously the courthouse there, where we made the base a little solid, more rugged, and changed the upper level to have more solid limestone on the 2 ends, because both those are, spaces that need windows. We still have this public lobby space here that should be more open, we feel, but we put a colonnade of limestone along there to make it feel more solid. We do have the entrance to this facility is down behind the courthouse, and that's more glass there to direct people to that spot and provide an open entrance. And we have on the backside, I mean, if this is a direction that we think we should go on the backside, we would continue this idea and have more of these solid panels and then punched openings for office windows. So when we have a facilities subcommittee, that's kind of the feedback that I received, that this would be more in line with what people thought, that, not some crystal palace, what we heard as a criticism and question of whether this can save any money. I can't say that this really saves a lot of money. We aren't building so much glass, but you're putting stone on instead, so that probably.
But you did think they were pretty close to a wash, right?
Yeah, I think it's a wash. We might save, $50,000. And when I talked to the cost consultant, they thought that, that they have an allowance in there for like 60% glass, and they said, well, if we drop that down to 40%, you might save $50,000. It wouldn't make a big dent in the overall.
So this is more to address concerns that people had about aesthetics.
Yeah.
It doesn't really address cost issues.
So that shows, yeah, that's not a flat roof. Well, it never was flat. It had a low slope to roof drains, but, we haven't shown that view of the top, obviously.
I was wondering if he could introduce himself.
Sure.
I'm Dwight Doberstein with Newman Munson Architects.
Dwight Doberstein?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any questions for Dwight?
Like, can you remind us, who is maybe housed on the first couple floors, in other words, that comes by stone now?
Well, the court support is on the top 2 floors, 4th and 5th floors. And so what we have here is a public lobby, and then really in the middle of the building where that spine through, those would be all the courtrooms. And on the back side are the judges' offices and the court reporters' offices, and so it's kind of in zones that way. Down below is the jail. There's 2 floors of jail, and then below that, which is not in this view, is the sheriff's office.
So having that stone as opposed to more open is not going to violate, there has to be so much monuments, because of that backwards, there has to be so much light, natural light, allowed by code.
Yeah, and we like natural light, and we're trying to get as much of that as
So
possible.
that's not going to prevent that?
No.
Okay.
What feedback we heard is that people would like to match the color of the courthouse and have that as part of the new facility. We can't necessarily match all those ornate details because it's just too expensive, to build something like that with, with all this dental molding or with gables or anything like that. So this is meant to be, again, just a backdrop for the courthouse. I think it provides a nice backdrop from Clinton Street, and we're trying to keep it low so that when you're viewing it from the other side, you see as much of the courthouse as possible. So the overall shape, we haven't changed at all, and the design of how it lays out inside. Yes?
I think if you had a peaked roof,
Can you come up to the microphone, please?
Oh, sorry. I'm Maria Conzemius, and I was wondering, I was thinking if you had a peaked roof, which would probably work better anyway, popping my peas. Popping my peas. Anyway, if you had a peaked roof, I think it would match the courthouse better. You could surely match the color of the shingles, and I've never heard of a flat roof that worked as well as a peaked roof, but I'm not an architect.
Yeah, we considered that. The biggest problem is that's a lot of volume. I mean, this is a very big, well, you know, the distance is quite large. You know, if you put a pitched roof on that, you get a lot of volume up there that costs money. And so we don't know what to use all that space for.
I don't think it would, I mean, I think it might work better and might look better, otherwise I'd probably prefer a detached facility. That's just my opinion.
The library has a flat roof, and it looks great.
Well, it seems to me like you probably, if you could show just some roof design, not necessarily even one that's on there, but just some roofs that your groups have done over the years, just to kind of show what, it's hard to tell.
Thing that says this is sloped in a red arrow.
When the architect says it's not a flat roof, there's slope in the roof, given the climate and the needs of the weather, I think we should believe it.
We learned long ago when we've done a lot of schools and we meet with those school boards, they say we do not want a flat roof. And we say we never do flat roofs. And all our roofs have a good pitch roof. And it's just that when a building gets big, it's hard to pitch it very far. And all of a sudden you have this huge attic space, and how do you deal with that? The most economical roof is the membrane roof that this would have. And it's just they're either glued together or heat welded together, but they are guarantees, warranties for 20 years. The industry has really perfected those roofs, and I have nothing against them. I actually prefer a pitched roof, and I would put it on there if we could, but the cost would be prohibitive, I think, unless we could figure out something to use it for, and it doesn't fit very well in this type of facility.
Well, I did like the original design, but I also like this kind of limestone look. And I think either one is fine with me.
Dwayne, on the, obviously, from that particular angle, trying to figure out what's Harrison Street, there would be some desire to potentially expand the building envelope at some point for a future constituency. What is that?
So we still would have the same plan to extend, the idea was always to expand this direction to the south. And we have two main corridors that run north-south in this building. So here's one, there's a big opening there, and here's one there. So as this building expands to the south, it's just a matter of removing the glass and extending those corridors. So that's the plan for future expansion. And then actually, this whole facade could just keep marching on to the south and tie all together. So the nice thing is that, limestone like this is local. If you consider Anamosa local, there's limestone available there, and it's easy to match in the future whenever this is added onto.
Any more questions for Dwight? Yeah.
Larry Wilson, it's not so much a question, but something I hope we could address. There's been a lot of question about how many jail cells are needed. We've acknowledged that a certain number, I'm not going to try to specify the exact number, I don't know what it is, are for the future. So we don't have to come back in 15 years and build another wing. What I'd like the architects to answer, put to rest, is there some way to build what we need now and in the near future, and maybe add or expand shelling, by whatever architectural technique we can use, so that we can, in other words, if we don't really need the 243, we wouldn't build them. If we do, it could be easily done.
Yeah, we gave the CJC some of those options earlier on as to how to cut back, and the answer was yes, that you could shell part or all of each of the pods of the jail. And there's basically two pods, there's one on this end and one on that end, they're 2-story pods. The maximum number of beds in a pod was about 100. But we had kind of a combination of cell blocks so that you could divide up your inmates in different ways as you need to manage that population, I guess, in the jail. You can't mix men and women, for example. You can't mix sick people with healthy people. So you got to have a variety of types of cell blocks. But you could easily shell out a portion or all of a pod, and then obviously it's going to be more expensive to come back and finish that off in the future, because now you're trying to work within a confined space. How do you want to get concrete in there, for example? We talked about, well, what's the level of shelling out? I mean, what's the level of finish? If you wanted to save money, maybe you do some of the concrete work now, but you don't do the HVAC and lighting. So there's variations on that theme, but I think the idea was that it's easier to get the shell built and then finish it off as you need it. Be less disruptive than, actually adding on to the building, and that can be done too. But we need the building stacks nicely now, and so it's hard to cut out cells and not cut out the rest of the program. This jail's only 40% of this total program, so if you're going to cut out a piece in the middle, you still have the courtrooms above and the sheriff's office below that you have to cut out too. I think we need all those spaces. So the big issue in the election was, well, too many beds, but you can't just cut out that portion and keep this concept.
Well, we build something that size, but then perhaps not actually build the cells.
That's right, that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
what that number of cells is and what number of beds, that's the question I think we need to hear. And then we can provide drawings to show, what could be, left unfinished, how much that would save.
Money, what's the population, a normal day?
Right now, it's in the 140.
Today it's around 60 or so.
160 this morning.
I've been on this week.
I'm sorry, what was that?
160 this morning.
I said I've been gone in school this week, sorry.
I just want to add another comment. If there should be a way, if we choose as an alternative way to address the issues, that some of this would be shelved, then we would also have to have some idea that if they aren't needed, if that space isn't needed for jail in the future, then it has to be used for something else that's of important use, and not just storage, for instance, in long term. So it'd have to have an alternative useful purpose.
Yeah, so we've tried to keep this very flexible as far as the layout and the organization, so that if it had to be something else, and it's just be open space. Right now, you could read.
Or storage for the short term.
Yeah.
I was just hoping to come up with an option to deal with the issues that we're hearing.
Yeah.
Does the 160 include people who have farmed out?
Yeah, we can't hold the 160.
Oh, right.
So they've got about 90, and then there's about 70 out. Further questions for Dwight? Thank you for
So if this is the direction we'd like to go further, we can kind of flesh this out with some other views of, so, and the back. Okay.
So, again, we still have some time, we're moving right along here, but I did want to, again, kind of get at, are there some specific things that we can discuss next month with the idea of making recommendations to the board on those specific things? And what I'm thinking about are there specific changes, for example, that folks about in a month and then address. Can you come to the mic again, please?
We have to make those decisions. We want to go forward with the same project. We want to find a way to state it. We want to change what we're doing. I think those are questions we have to answer before we can move forward. We definitely have to answer them. We better be prepared to do it next time.
It was discussed at the Public Outreach and Information Subcommittee, the actual name of the facility, Justice Center. A lot of us feel like that's sort of insulting, and considering we don't really believe there's much justice in Johnson County. And also, I think it was deceiving to the public to have the name Justice Center on the ballot. If maybe we can consider something like jail and courthouse combination, something that's a little more open and honest, I guess, especially when it comes to the wording on the ballot. We're just not keen on the name Justice Center, and I know it was brought up at that subcommittee meeting, and I was just wondering if anyone had thoughts on that, or if it was discussed since the since the subcommittee meeting.
I can tell you that it hasn't been discussed because this is the first meeting where anything has been discussed. Is there somebody that would like to respond in any way?
I think we've heard about that meeting, and I think we heard a lot of things at that meeting, and I think we're considering them. I think the name Justice Center came up because it was a combination of a lot of court and court-related activities, and despite other people, I think justice is done in the courthouse, and I think the name wasn't meant to be deceiving in any way, it's not deceiving in any way, and it was done because justice is part of what the county attempts to do inside that courthouse, and bringing the people from the jail and the courthouse, justice is done there as well. So the name was meant to try to come together with a common name that would put together all of the functions that were there. So we have listened to what they had to say. We just haven't made any opinion, but I do take offense with the fact that justice is not done in this county. I'm part of that system. I've been part of that system for a long time. And I can tell you that when I've been there, you can make examples of anything. You can make examples of an arrest that shouldn't have been made. You can make examples of a case that maybe you wanted to win, but you didn't win. And sometimes you don't think you're going to win, and you win. But that's part of the system. You bring jurors in, they do their job. You bring good judges in, they do their job. So on isolated incidences where things go wrong, I'm not sure that should be a consideration. At the same time, I'm open for ideas, as I indicated to everybody who was present at the meeting. I think we're all open to the topics that have been discussed in this campaign. But simple sometimes is not necessarily the only way to go.
But I would add, I don't think that the naming it the Justice Center was a political statement by the board. I wouldn't care if you have a sign in the front of the building that says Johnson County Courthouse, and a sign in the back that says Johnson County Sheriff's Office or Johnson County Jail. I just want the public to have this service. The one combined facility that some of us went to see in Story County just happened to be called the Story County Justice Center. I don't think it was a political decision. I think we just kind of went with what we heard.
Well, and part of it was to emphasize the fact that it was not just a jail. Because
Yes.
although everybody knew we had jail bed needs, most people had less understanding of exactly what kind of space needs the rest of the system had.
I think it was designed to emphasize that it was both facilities and not just to move jail plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for folks to understand there was no plot.
Well,
Anything
that's-
that was decided in these open meetings, and anybody could have come and anybody could have listened, and there was no time for secret plotting. It was done here, in this room, by these people, and it was done earnestly and honestly, and
I want to comment a little bit. I think I'm not being interrupted.
I just wanted to say that some may feel justice is done in this county, some may not, and that's a political discussion that the board will hear, and the board as our politically elected representatives will make a judgment about.
And so these people don't think that justice is being done here. Well, I'm totally convinced it is, and it may not always be perfect, but they're actually obstructing justice being done. We have how many? 70 people that are farmed out now to different jails, which means these people did not have easy access to their lawyers, did not have easy access to their families. They're taken from where they should be to a different strange place. To me, to be against this justice center is against justice. These poor criminals who are having to be transported to different jails are sacrificing a lot because you don't think we should have a new jail. I think it's part of the justice system that prolongs the time that they spend in jail and getting them to the courtrooms. I think it's sad that that's how you feel. It's inhumane.
Sure. I think you're missing the point, maybe. I just feel like there's a lot of people that voted for the Justice Center that probably wouldn't have if they knew it was a jail. I'm just saying that.
It's an educated community, I'm convinced.
I just think that
Well, we'll have to
jail
obviously-
and courthouse combination would be a good name.
Some people obviously feel one way and some folks feel the other, and we'll have to agree to disagree because I don't think we have a ability to poll on that necessarily, so. I see another person raising their hand in the back. Could you come up, please, and give your name?
Name is Robert George, and I did work on the committee of no vote. And I would like to also add with Martha that not everybody that I solicited for putting signs up and getting opinions said, but there were, I would say, probably about 60–70% of the people I talked to, and they were surprised that there was a jail involved with this ballot. Whatever that meant, that they were at that opinion, that's what I came across, and that's what I'm just telling you now. People did not know, the ones that I talked to at least. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to kind of say the absolute opposite of that. I had the ability to speak with a lot of students, and when I came into contact with people, they said that they thought that it was only a jail, and that there wasn't the diversion programs in the courthouse, and that they were probably more inclined to vote for it if they knew that there had been more than a jail. And so I think that something we can probably both agree on is that we need to maybe educate the students more. Now there's a variety of ways you can do that, but I think we're both saying that education needs to be done more if this comes back up again.
Probably always the case. Good point.
Ron, you brought up a good point, and we need to make decisions about when to put it on the ballot, if we're going to put it on the ballot, and how to move forward. One of the maybe upcoming meetings.
I really can't hear her.
We spent a lot of time focusing on.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We spent a lot of time